time and 6 a.m. India. So we can get started. We will start with our prayer.
सहनावतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै शांति शांति शांति.
Okay, welcome. So as announced, we are starting a new topic today. We had 16 sessions on Vedanta. The objective of that session was introduce the key concept without following a particular textbook. So having completed that, naturally we wanted to start with a introductory textbook, a traditional textbook. So we had different choices, like we had Tattvabodha, we had Atmabodha, we had Vivek Chudamani. There are several books, but we picked up Atmabodha because it is not too short, it is not too long. If you take a Vivek Chudamani, it is 700 plus verses. And if you take Tattvabodha, it is too small. So we went like some intermediate book, Atmabodha. So this is a book composed by Shankaracharya. The objective of this book is to introduce the basic concepts of Vedanta. So just like we start with any classes, when we start a topic, especially with a scripture, we need to study it thoroughly. One thing is we need to know that where exactly that scripture fits within the overall range or the different types of system of scriptures we had. So in between, some people asked me also, like, can you give a overall introduction of the scriptures so that when we take up a particular scripture, we know exactly where we need to relate to that scripture. So what I propose today is we try to understand the length and the breadth of our scriptures, right from Veda to the Prakarana Granthas, and then we see where exactly Atmabodha fits, so that we know exactly where this particular scripture fits within the domain of the entire scriptural literatures. It is extremely important that you need to understand the different types of scriptures, and that will help you to study it properly. And you understand what exactly is the role of each of these scriptures. Makes sense, right? Okay, so with that, let's get started. And if you have any questions, please stop and ask that questions immediately. Means if it is out of topic, I may put that into the parking lot, but otherwise I'll try to answer that. Okay, so let's get started. So the first question is, let me ask you a question. What is your understanding of a scripture? What exactly is a scripture is? See, within Sanatana Dharma itself, we have different hundreds of scriptures. If you go to the other religion, you have Bible, you have Quran, you have Dhammapada. There are different types of scriptures in the entire spiritual or religious domain. So when you hear a term scripture, what exactly is your understanding? Anybody? Make a guess.
Holy book.
Holy means what?
Something our old rishis have written for us.
I would say guidelines.
For example, the rishis has written something on say, Dhanurveda. Can you consider that as a scripture?
I guess so. I mean, it's not
at all. There is a difference, right? So what do you call as a physics book? And what do you call as a biology book? And some books you call it as, say, sociology book. Some book you call as biology. A body of knowledge depending upon the content matter or the subject matter, it can be referred as a physics book or a chemistry body of knowledge or a biology body of knowledge or a computer science body of knowledge. There are different body of knowledges available. A body of knowledge can be called as a scripture if it meets certain conditions. Anybody? Okay. So this definition of the scripture is given by one of the greatest monk in the modern world, which is Swami Dayananda. So he gave a brilliant definition of what exactly is a scripture. So he says, it is not his words, it is of course coming from the scriptural literature itself. He says, a scripture is a body of knowledge. See, considered with some divine authoritative, like it is not came from a human intellect. And what exactly is the subject matter? It has a subject matter which is not available using the normal means of knowledge. What exactly is the usual means of knowledge for you to understand something? If you take physics, it is your sense organs and probably your mind, right? So you observe a fact, and from that fact you infer something. You may use some instruments for that observation. For example, you may use a telescope, you may use a microscope, and based on that you may derive something. That's exactly what is the body of knowledge of physics or a biology. But scriptures are talking about something which is not usually available through our normal means of knowledge. For example, what you can see by the eyes, yet what you can infer by the mind is not the main content of a scripture. So that is what it is. And this information is typically revealed to certain people. And that is exactly what a scripture is. This is a very good definition of the scripture. So with this definition, when you look at the Vedic scriptures, because the first definition of scripture, it is applicable to all the scriptures of the world, whether it is a Bible or a Quran or a Dhammapada or the Vedas, everything, that definition is applicable. Now, when you come to the Vedic scriptures, so we from the entire domain of scriptural literature, we are coming to the Vedic scriptures. The Vedic scripture means any scripture or the entire scriptural literature derived from the Vedas is called Shastram in Sanskrit. See, in some of our Indian vernaculars, Shastram means science. But here we use the Shastram with a different meaning. So let's try to understand what exactly is the word Shastram means. In Sanskrit, when you take Shastram, it comes from two root words. One is called Shas and the other one is called Tra. The word Tra, it's called Pratyaya. It means to protect or to teach or to protect. And Shas, the word Shas means through a commandment or through a teaching. So Shastram means that which protects you through teaching or through instruction or through a commandment. So that is what is Shastram. A literature or a body of knowledge, through some instruction, it protects you. It protects you to live, means from a lot of dangers, a lot of problems. And that is what the definition of Vedic scriptures. Makes sense, right? Shastram, the word Tra is there in almost all the literature we have. Like mantram is what? That which protects you when you meditate upon that. That is mantram. So the Tra means protect. And Shastra means that which protects you through an instruction. Clear?
Yeah.
So in our literature, right, it's an evolution. Initial stages of our spiritual growth, the scripture will protect you through an instruction. It will give you a set of do's and don'ts. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And do this, do this, do this. Then once you grow a little bit further, right, this instruction or commandment moves into a teaching mode. So initially, for a kid, right, you will say that don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But once the kid grows a little bit further, right, it means, for example, you tell your child, no, don't touch the fire. initially the child may not even understand. So, but through a commandment, you make sure that the child is not getting into a problem. But later point of time, what is going to happen? When the child understand, if I touch the fire, it is not good for me, that it protects you through that understanding. So the role of a scripture is initially it appears to be some commandment, but you need to grow and you need to understand. And when you understand what is going to happen, again, it is protect you. Okay, so that's the two stages of the scriptures. So with that, let's try to see in the Vedic scriptural literature. Vedic scriptural literature means any scriptural literature which is based on the teachings of the Vedas. That is what it is. We can say that there are 7 layers of scriptural literature because we have a vast system of scriptural literature. That is what we call as Sanatana Dharma, the eternal order. So the first layer is, of course, the Vedas. And the second layer is known as Sutras. And the third one is Vedas, means it is the primordial scripture. It is revealed to the ancient rishis. And Sutras are nothing but aphorism. We are going to teach one of them. And the third category of the scriptural literature is known as Smriti. Smriti means memory, that which is interpretation of the original scripture by somebody else. That is what is Shruti, Smriti. And then Puranas. Puranas means you see the stories like the Bhagavatam, Garuda Puranam, Vishnu Puranam. All these are Puranas. So the Vedic teachings through stories is what is Purana. And the fourth category, the fifth category is known as Itihasa. So they use some historical event to teach the Vedic teaching. So we will see what exactly it is. And the last two categories are known as Bhashyam. Bhashyam means it is the commentary of the other 5. Like Vedas are properly commented, Sutras are commented, Smritis are commented, Puranas are commented, Itihasas are commented. This is what is Bhashyam. And finally, the last categories of the scripture literature is known as Prakarana Granthas. They are introductory book and also they could be very advanced book. And what we are going to see in this particular session is a Prakarana Grantha. So now you know where exactly is Atma Bodha fits into. Atma Bodha is the 7th layer of the vast scriptural literature we have. Have you heard of all these names at least previously?
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So let's go and try to understand, get a very high level overview of each of these scriptures. So first layer is the Vedas. Vedas. What exactly is Veda? By the way, it comes from the root called Vid. Vid means to know.
No.
Vedas means knowledge. It is a noun out of it. Vid is a verb, means to know. Veda is a noun out of it. It means the knowledge. The knowledge about 3 things. The knowledge about yourself, the knowledge about the world, and the knowledge about the Ishvara. Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara. So the knowledge about yourself, the knowledge about the external world, and if there is a governing entity or an intelligent entity that monitors and controls this entire universe, what exactly is that entity and the nature of that? So these are the 3 subject matter of the Veda. And it's a vast literature. Almost 20,000 mantras are there. By the way, what is a mantra? I just explained. Just like Shastra, mantra means mana plus tra. So manana means what? Contemplating upon. And tra means again protect. So that which protects you when you contemplate upon that is a mantra. For example, if you contemplate upon Mrityunjaya mantra, which comes from Veda, it protects you. I promised I will do a 1 session on Mrityunjaya mantra and 1 more mantra we asked, Gayatri mantra, right? We'll do that separately. But mantras are something that protects you when you contemplate upon that. And this Vedas, every verse in the Veda is known as a mantra. So it is a vast literature. It is a body of knowledge. It means knowledge about yourself, the God and the world. And this is known as Vedas. And one sage, Veda Vyasa, means the Vyasa means a compiler. Veda Vyasa means the one who compiled the Veda. So a sage called Krishna Dvaipayana later came to be known as Vyasa. He compiled these vast literature into 4 Vedas: Rik, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva. Rik, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva. The Rig Veda consists of all the mantras revealed to various rishis at various point of time, and in the form of poetic compositions, right? When a rishi in his deep contemplation gets a message revealed to him, for example, the Mahamrityunjaya mantra got revealed to sage Vasishta, whereas the Gayatri mantra got revealed to Vishwamitra. So each rishi are known as seers, means that is the literal meaning of the word rishi. The rishi means one who discovered the mantra. So it is not coming from their intellect. It is believed that these mantras got revealed to them. And whatever they got revealed, they expressed something as poetry. Sometimes they expressed it in the form of a prose. And sometimes they expressed it in the form of a song. So Vyasa, what he did was, whatever people compiled in the form of poetry, he organized everything that into Rigveda. So Rigveda is a compilation of all the Vedic mantras which are written in a poetic form. Yajurveda is a compilation in the form of prose. And naturally the Samaveda is a compilation of all the song. That is why Samaveda is considered as the mother of all the Indian music. It talks about 3 different notes: Anudatta, Udatta, Swarita. So like that, in fact, 4. So those musical notes are being used, and you can chant the mantra in the, meaning you can sing like a song with the swaras, with arohanas, avarohanas, etc. That is Samaveda. Atharva Veda mainly was grouped based upon the compilation by 2 rishis. It is Atharvana Rishi and Angiras. There are 2 rishis were there. One is called Atharvana and the other one is Angiras. And their compilation put together form Atharva Veda. And Atharva Veda has a mixture of poetry is there, the prose is there, and the songs are there. So this is the organization of the Vedas. Very high level overview. Got it? Any questions? Okay, so this is a high level diagram. You can see the Vedas are 4 in number: Rik, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva. So each of these Vedas has 4 parts. One is Samhita, which is the basic mantra. And then the Brahmanas, the rituals. I mean, the first portion of the Veda is mainly the ritualistic part. So the rituals means how this can be used in rituals. And Aranyakas is a kind of meditation on these rituals. And finally, the last part of the Veda is known as Jnanakanda, which is known as Upanishads. And the Upanishads reveals the nature of yourself and Ishvara and the connection. So the Vedas has on a high level 2 categories. One is called the Karma Kanda, which talks about the ritualistic portion of the Veda, and the Jnana Kanda, which talks about the knowledge part of the Veda. And this ritualistic portion of the Veda, right, it is an emulation of our worldly activity. So in the world, what we do, we work hard for earning money or earning like some luck, or sometimes we work hard to say, to avoid certain thing. For example, if it is a disease or a pandemic, we do some worldly activity. Like that, every worldly activity is emulated or simulated through a ritual. That's exactly what is the first portion of the Veda. Whereas the last portion of the Veda is not even talking about any ritual. It is talking purely about the knowledge. And in our sessions, our focus is the second part of the Veda, or the end portion of the Veda. And that is why it is essentially known as Veda Anta, the end portion of the Veda. That is typically known as Upanishads. And there are 10 main Upanishads. Upanishads are many, thousands of Upanishads are there. At least we have compiled at least 108 Upanishads in the modern world. And this, out of this 108 Upanishads, 10 Upanishads are known as Mukhya Upanishad or principal Upanishads, because Shankaracharya has written commentary. Why? Because if you study these 10 Upanishads, you get the end-to-end picture. It gives you a holistic, complete view. So this is a very high-level overview of the Vedas.
So Rajaji, question:
Please.
when they say Vedanta, is it the same as Upanishads?
Absolutely. No, actually, the Vedanta means any teachings based on the ideas of the Upanishads are broadly called as Vedanta. Strictly calling Vedanta means it is the Upanishads. It
Okay.
started with what exactly is the content discussed in the Upanishad, and then what happened? Secondary scriptures started evolving based on that teaching. For example, sutras, the other literature started evolving, and all that can be considered as Vedanta on a high level. But to be specific, Vedanta means it is the end portion of the Veda.
Mm-hmm.
Namaste, Rajeshji. I have a question. Can you go back to the previous screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So here the Samhitas and are mantras, Brahmanas are rituals, and then from Brahmanas, the Aranyakas have evolved.
Aranyakas got evolved. It is kind of a meditation on these rituals. It is a little bit different. Aranyaka means it is the forest. That is the literal meaning. So when you evolve, like you go to the Vanaprastha side, and at that point of time, you start meditating. Again, it is the rituals, nothing more than that.
Okay, so the Jnana Kanda portion is about what you're teaching right now. We are going to concentrate on that, right? That doesn't involve any kind of ritual.
Not at all. So
correct. But when you hear the Karma Kanda, are we supposed to observe both the Karma Kanda and the Jnana Kanda, or only Jnana Kanda is enough and forget about the rituals?
You can definitely, Shankaracharya in his commentary say that karma means you can do karma if you want. You don't have to stop it, but you have to change your attitude. For example, you don't have to renounce the worldly karma when you go to the Jnana Kanda, right? Means if you are a doctor, you can continue to be a doctor. What we are asking people to change is their attitude towards karma. So essentially, when you learn the Jnana Kanda, these karmas will be converted as a karma yoga. So we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, correct. But the Vaidikas, the people who are following the Vaidikas, like the priest and all those people, they are doing the Karma Kanda portion, correct?
Correct. But they can do the Karma Kanda as a yoga. Then what happens? It won't bind you. Whether it is Laukika Karma or Vaidika Karma, you can do it as a yoga. When you do it as a yoga, it won't bind you. Otherwise, what I'm going to do, I'm just doing a ritual to get money. It is no way different than a person working in the Wall Street. Both means there is nothing wrong in that, but it won't help you to grow spiritually at all.
But that is their livelihood, right? The priest's livelihood.
Yeah, but means the person working in Wall Street, that is their livelihood. So the difference is the same karma. When you work in the Wall Street, you can do that as a karma yoga. When you do that as a karma yoga, the same result you get, but you won't get bind with that. So we'll see this later. But the thing is, whether it is Vaidya karma or Laukika karma, if you do with proper attitude, it is fine. You don't have to stop anything.
Thank you.
That is the difference in the Vedanta. Vedanta is not rejecting any schools, but it is helping you to grow further. That's it.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's go to the second category of literature, which is known as Sutra. Sutra literally means it is aphorism. Aphorism means something written in the form of a short, concise statement. A simple example is E equal to mc square. Einstein wrote that. It encapsulates an entire big idea, right? So the whole thing is encapsulated in a small, concise statement. So Sutra came at a time when the tradition was completely oral. There was no written literature. So you needed a means to capture everything in a codified form. And also you wanted to transfer this teaching from one person to the other easily. So Sutra helped a lot. So the sutras help you to remember this mentally. For example, Yogaha Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Very easy. It's a small phrase. That's it. But that phrase has a lot of meaning. And see, the only difference is we believe that Vedas is revealed knowledge, whereas Sutra is a product of a human intellect. So somebody who understood means from the understanding of the Vedic literature, they composed sutras. For example, Brahma Sutra, if you take, it is a composition of Vyasa. Vyasa, from his understanding of the Vedic teaching, he composed Brahma Sutra. Patanjali, from his understanding of yoga, Vedas, he composed Yoga Sutra. Maharshi Narada, from his understanding of the Vedic teaching, he compiled the Bhakti Sutra. So these are written by rishis. So this is a product of a human intellect, but of course the evolved human being. Whereas we believe that Veda, even though it came through the mouth of a rishi, it was revealed to him. Whereas Sutra, he composed it. That's one difference. One more point about Sutra. Sutra, there are two functions for the Sutra. One is called codification and the other one is called classification. The codification of a Sutra literature means it is properly coded. Like Vedas are not sequenced, like different topics. When we study Upanishad, you will understand. It doesn't follow a sequential order at all. Whereas if you take Bhagavad Gita, it follows a sequence. From one verse, you can see a perfect sequence. A train of thought is there. But if you go to Veda, you won't see that. That's why I was telling, like, we need to study these initial literature before we go to Vedas. So Vedas, it talks about a diverse topic, but not arranged in an organized way. Whereas Sutra pulls these ideas from Veda and present that in a very sequenced form. So that is the classification part. So the classification of the Sutra, of the Vedic teaching, it helps us to understand this properly. For example, Patanjali, what he did was, he classified the teachings of yoga, which is spread across the Veda, and put that into a Yoga Sutra form. So it helps you to understand it properly. So that is, sorry, the code means this classification, codification is important. And then you have called clarification. Clarification means sometimes it appears that some of these Vedic teachings are very vague, because we talked about the Karma Kanda, right? And Jnana Kanda, and a lot of clarification is needed. And sutras, what they did was, if a teaching appears to be a little bit confusing or complicated, sutras clarify that. So in crystal clear terms, the sutra explains the ideas, and it also provides the sequence. So the clarity and also the sequencing is the beauty of sutras. And in fact, there are three popular sutras. One is the Brahma Sutra of Vyasa, Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, and the Bhakti Sutra of Narada. So this is the second category of our vast scriptural literature. Got it, right? So Vedas, first layer. Second layer is Sutra. The third layer is known as Smriti. So Smriti means what? Memory. Shruti means what? What I am hearing. So the Vedas are known as Shruti. Some teachers, from what they heard from somebody else, they started writing certain literature. And that is what is known as Smriti. So Smriti literally means that which is remembered. So it is an interpretation of their understanding for a particular time or for a particular age. So these popular Smritis are like Manu Smriti, Yajnavalkya Smriti, Parashara Smriti. All are Smritis. But in the modern context, they don't have much relevance because it was written for a period of time. And if you read that now, you won't even understand. It can be misinterpreted a lot. So there is not a lot of value for these Smriti literature at this point of time. And there is a clear definition. If a Smriti contradicts the Shruti, Shruti means Veda, Smriti means these remembered literature, you have to take the Shruti and reject the Smriti. So that is why some of these Smritis, you can see that it contradicts from Vedic teaching. For example, if you take Manusmriti, it can be misinterpreted. I'm not saying that that is the intent, but it can be misinterpreted as, okay, women are treated separately, and you see some of the categories of people are treated separately. So that is not in line with the actual Vedic teaching. So those portions should be rejected. So in the modern world, this Smriti literature do not have much significance. It was related to a particular period of time, a particular social order, a particular situation. So that's why it do not have much importance in the modern world. Whereas sutras, which is talking about the timeless teachings of the Veda, do not have any issue, because you can use all these sutras now, just like you were using that 5,000 years back, and that can be even used even after 5,000 years. It is perfectly fine. So, but just for the sake of completeness, I wanted to mention the Smriti literature also. For example, the Manusmriti has that famous or notorious quote, "Na stri swatantryam arhati." But people don't quote the other three lines prior to that. Like that, it is subjected to a lot of misinterpretation. So that's just a FYI. Let's move to the next literature. This is called Puranas. The fourth layer of scriptures is known as Puranas. So Purana, the definition means Pura api Nava eti. Nava means new or relevant or fresh. Pura means ancient. So Purana means it is extremely ancient, but it is still fresh. That's what it means. And it is going to remain ever fresh. So the idea of Purana is to present this teachings of the Veda, right? To present the teachings of the Veda in the form of stories. So, for example, like Bhagavata Purana is a popular Purana. It talks about the same Vedic idea, but in a story form. So, because it's easy for anybody to understand. One of the idea is the basic idea conveyed by the Puranas or the Itihasas later we see is one message of the Veda. It is called Dharmam Chara. Dharmam Chara. Follow Dharma. And what is Dharma? We will explain that a little bit later when we go to Atma Bodha. So Dharma on a high level, please understand that what needs to be done. It is not religion. It is not a particular code of conduct. But for example, the body has a dharma. If you don't exercise, you are violating the dharma. Your speech has certain dharma. You cannot violate that. You cannot use abusive words. That is violation of dharma. You have a social order, because how do you interact with other people? You cannot cheat another person. That is dharma. So dharma means it is the natural order of the universe. And these Puranas, in the form of stories, it is going to help you how to follow the dharma. And now, who wrote Purana? It is believed, I don't know whether it is true or false, but it is believed that sage Vyasa composed all the Puranas. And how many Puranas are there? 18 main Puranas and 18 subsidiary Puranas are there. So overall, 36 Puranas are there. And he composed stories depending upon your own taste. For example, some people are fond of Vishnu. So you have Vishnu Purana. And some people are fond of Lord Ishvara in the form of Shiva. Because we will see that all these Shiva, Vishnu, Devi, Subramanya, everybody is same. But if you want to relate to Ishvara in the form of an ascetic, in the form of Shiva, that is fine. If you want to relate to Ishvara in the form of Vishnu, that is also fine. Because the method of relating to Ishvara is different, the worship is different, the stories are different. So it helps you to connect God in a way that is convenient to you. So that is why these 36 Puranas are there. Skanda Purana is there, Garuda Purana is there, Brahmanda Purana is there. There are a lot of Puranas. Out of all these, most popular Purana is Bhagavatam. The next literature is known as Itihasa. Itihasa is the fifth layer of our scriptural literature. The word Itihasa, it's a compound word again. It has three compounds. One is called Iti, second one is called Ha, and the third one is Asa. Iti means thus or in this way. Ha means definitely. Asa means occurred. So something happened this way, or you can say that definitely something happened. So the difference between Purana is Purana means it is mythological stories. Whereas Itiha, because you are talking about something that is not happened, means beyond the human world. But if you want to relate to something, which happened in this world based on a real history, because I'm not interested in what happened in Kailash or Vaikund or in Brahmalok, but I wanted to know something happened in the history. So what they did was they took a couple of historical incidents happened in ancient India and they developed some stories on top of that. Again, Itihasa means it is based on history. You cannot say that the entire Itihasa is history. Of course, fictions was added. Let's be honest. Fiction was added, but of course, the historical event was there. So you can see the exaggerations. For example, those who know Ramayana, how many heads Ravana has? 10 heads. So that is not practically possible. That is the exaggerations. So in Mahabharata, Ramayana, you can see that. So the two Itihasas in our scriptures are, one is Ramayana with 24,000 verses composed by sage Valmiki. Wonderful book. I'm reading it. I'm amazed to see the literal genius of Valmiki. And the second one, what is I was telling in the last class also, in the Vedanta class also, it always makes me perplexed. 100,000 verses. So I was telling you, right? I was planning to read it, and I thought, okay, 1 year I will read 2,000 verses. That means approximately 8 verses per day, right? If that is the case, it will take 50 years for me to read it. How can somebody compose it? It is that vast. So this is Mahabharata. So the primary purpose of the Itihasa is to present history exactly as it happened, right? The primary purpose is to demonstrate Vedic teaching. So we use history as a means of it. Correct? That's a huge difference. So you take the historical event, you add or you adjust that historical teaching in such a way that it can be used as a means of presenting a beautiful ideas from the Veda. So that is what is Itihasa. So Itihasas and Puranas both present the Vedic teaching, essential teaching of Dharmam Chara in the form of a story, and the difference is Itihasa is based on history, human history. Puranas are, of course, it is celestial history. Actually, we don't know whether it happened or not, and it doesn't matter to us, but it demonstrates the Vedic teaching very well. So these are the 5 categories of literature. So one more point, right? So for example, if you take Mahabharata, sometimes you can see even a small idea. For example, in Vedas, you see Satyam Vada, always speak truth. That one idea goes to thousands of verses in Mahabharata through the story of Harishchandra. Dharmam Chara, through the story of Rama, it expands 24,000 verses. So like that. And another style of this Itihasa and Purana is, it is Anvaya Vyatireka approach, meaning it tells you some good example, what you can follow, and it gives you some wrong example also. You know that you should be like a Prahlada. At the very same time, it tells you what? You should not be like a Hiranyakashipu. So this is what is Anvaya Vyatireka. This style is followed in all the scriptures. And Mahabharata, which is one of the best literature in the world, nothing is black and white. Everything is gray. Every character you can say a little bit of black and some white. Only difference is that, for example, if you take the Pandavas, you will see a little bit more white there. Every character has a gray shade and the degree varies. Dark and white means it's not the color I meant. What I meant is their nobility, right? Means all the noble characters, I mean, none of them are 100% noble, and even you can see some good qualities in Duryodhana. And you can see some bad qualities in Bhishma. You can see some bad qualities in Yudhishthira. So that's how Mahabharata is composed. And it's such a wonderful literature. So this is the fifth category of literature. Let's go to the next category of literature. This is called Bhashyam. Bhashyam refers to the commentaries written on the first 5 layers of the scriptures. For example, whether it is Vedas or Sutras or Smriti or Itihasa or Purana, sometimes what happens is you need to understand this properly. A lot of difficulties are there in understanding the scripture because you need to have a proper teaching methodology with proper example, proper framework to understand any body of knowledge. So for example, if you take physics, there are a lot of teaching methodologies, right? All these logics, all these additional teaching methodology, all that came to teach it properly. Without the help of this teaching methodology, which is known as sampradaya in our tradition, this teaching methodology is very important to understand the scriptural literature. So if you just go and read a scripture, it can be misinterpreted, unfortunately. So just to avoid that misinterpretation, certain teachers have written commentary. Commentary means it is beautifully written, word by word, what exactly it means, using a lot of references. And a lot of teachers have written. In the world of Advaita Vedanta, it is Shankaracharya is considered as one of the greatest teachers. In the world of dualism, it is Madhavacharya. In the world of Vishishta Advaitam, it is Ramanujacharya. But the point is that you need a traditional master, and whoever teaching you should be exposed to that traditional teaching. Otherwise, you lack clarity, you lack sequencing, and all that problem is there. And luckily, we are so lucky to have a teacher like Shankaracharya, who was able to comment upon almost all the scriptures. So there is a famous saint in Kerala. His name is Srinarayana Guru. He used to call Shankaracharya as Sarala Advaya Bhashyakara because he thought his Bhashya, nothing can be understood properly. And you would see anybody who exposed to Shankara's commentary, you can see how logical he is. For example, the Bhagavad Gita commentary, before he starts the Bhagavad Gita commentary, he dismisses all these Purvapakshis. Purvapakshis means those who are addicted to the rituals. And these Purvapakshis believe that even animal sacrifice is sanctioned by the scriptures. You can kill an innocent animal to please the god. So that was the belief at that point of time. You should see how he broke that type of arguments beautifully, because the scriptures can be misinterpreted. There is a verse in Mahabharata. The verse tells the Vedas are supposed to be removing the fear of everybody. But the Veda that is meant to remove all the fear of all the people is afraid of something. What is that? Misinterpretation. So to avoid that, you need to make sure that our teaching is grounded on the traditional teaching. We are allowed to interpret that in a modern way. For example, in our classes, you can see all the modern examples like software, hardware, all these movies and all these modern things. But it is rooted and grounded on the traditional teaching. It is very important. So that is why this Bhashyam is very important. Let's go to the final category of the scriptural literature. It is known as Prakarana Granthas. Prakarana Granthas means they are advanced textbooks or introductory textbooks written by various teachers to explain the teachings of this Vedanta. So the Bhashyam focuses only on one text. For example, if you take Shankaracharya's commentary on Mandukya Upanishad, he is focusing only on that. Whereas, for example, if you take the commentary of Vyasa on the Yoga Sutra, it is exactly only on Yoga Sutra. Whereas this Prakarana Grantha, they collect information from all these scriptures and explain that to us and introduce this teaching. And there are two types of Prakarana Grantha. The first category is known as introductory textbooks. So the popular textbooks are Tattva Bodha, Atma Bodha, Viveka Chudamani, Aparokshanubhuti. All these are introductory textbooks. And we are supposed to study these introductory textbooks before we get into the study of Upanishads or Bhagavad Gita. Reason is what? This is my favorite example. Suppose you are an ordinary layman. He is conversing with a software engineer. Two software engineers are talking. One person is saying that, okay, get that data from that table. The ordinary layman would wonder what exactly is the table is, right? Because there is a specific meaning for that technical term in the domain of computer science. Outside of that computer science domain, it can mean different things to different people. So it is extremely important for any student to understand what exactly is these technical terms are. And these Prakarana books explains the basic concepts along with these technical terms to a student. So once you have that background, you can go and study the higher scriptures, right? This is layer 7. You can go to layer 5, layer 3, layer 4, layer 1. So the purpose of these books are introduce the technical terms and the basic teachings of the Upanishads or Veda, so that when you go to a not so organized Veda, you won't be completely surprised. So that is the first part. And then the advanced Prakarana books are there. So that books are supposed to be studied after studying the Vedas. For example, Panchadashi. So these Prakarana books, there are two types of Prakarana book. One is pre-Vedic study or the pre-Upanishadic study. You have to study these books. And the second one is post-Upanishad study. It gives you a summary of the Upanishad. It gives you some connections of that Upanishads. So two books come to my mind is, one is Panchadashi and the other one is called Dakshinamurti Stotram. It is considered as a simple literature, but it is a PhD book in Vedanta. So this is the two categories of these Prakarana Granthas. So these are the 7 layers of our scriptural literature. So once again, we saw what is a scripture. It is a body of knowledge which is not available or which cannot be grasped using the normal way of our means of knowledge, like with your sense organs or with your understanding. So the Vedic literature, what we call it as Shastram, the literal meaning is what? It protects you when through instruction, initially through commandment and later through instruction or understanding, teaching. And then the entire system of Vedic literature can be classified into 7 layers. And the first layer, of course, is Vedas. And the Vedas are 4 in number. And they are compiled by the sage Vyasa, Rik, Yajur, Sama, Atharva. The Padya Pradhanam or the poetic form were classified into Rig Veda, whereas the prose content was classified as Yajur Veda, and the song content was classified as Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda has all the 4. Atharva Veda, the grouping came because it is the compilation come from 2 rishis, right? That is what the Atharva Veda is. And these Vedas are considered as revelations of God, and they were not written by human intellects. And this is the primary scripture of our Sanatana Dharma, modern world known as Hinduism. So this primordial scripture, so if any other scripture contradict with Vedas, we should take Vedas. That is the idea. And these Vedas are also known as Shruti because it is not remembered or analyzed. It is what is heard from the higher. And the second layer of literature is known as Sutra literature. Literally means it is a thread that connects all the Vedic teaching in a sequenced way, in a clear way. That is sutras. And we saw that it is codifies and clarifies the Vedic teaching. And the 3 popular sutras are Brahma Sutra of Vyasa, Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, and Bhakti Sutra of Vedavyas, means Narada. And the next layer of scripture, which is the third layer, is Smriti, which is in the form of poetry, but it is what a rishi remembered from the Vedic teaching. That's it. And as I said, it can be outdated at this in the modern world. And then the fourth layer is Puranas, which is full again in the form of poems. And these Puranas are ancient, but they are still relevant, and they present the Vedic teaching in the form of stories. And the fifth layer is known as Itihasa, which is basically the history. History is used to present the Vedic teaching. The entire Itihasa is not history, but the purpose is to present the Vedic teaching in the form of historical stories. And the sixth layer is Bhashyam, which is the commentaries written upon the other 5 layers. And the seventh layer is the Prakarana Granthas, which could be advanced textbooks or introductory textbooks. Some of these would be studied before the study of the Upanishads, and some of them should be studied after the study of the Upanishad. This is the entire scripture literature. So we started from the domain of scriptures. From there we came to like the Vedas, Vedic literature, and within Vedic literature we saw the 7 layers of scriptures, and then within the 7 layers, now from next week we are shifting our attention to the 7th layer, which is Atmabodha. So let me pause here. Any questions? But at least, do you know where exactly this Atmabodha fits now?
Yes, in the 7th layer.
Correct.
Prakarana.
Yeah. And did you get a high-level understanding, a high-level overview of our vast majority of scriptural literature?
Yes.
So,
Rajaji, so far I was under the impression that there are just 4 main types of Vedas: Sam, Yajur, Atharva, and Rigveda.
Correct.
But then, like, I didn't realize until now that Puranas, Ramayana, Mahabharata, these are all Vedas.
No, these are not Vedas. They are separate book, right? So only the Vedas are revelations of Ishvara, and every other layers of scripture means they are based on Vedic teaching, but they are composed by rishis. So please clarify, they are not Vedas, but they are based on Vedic teaching.
I see. So, but then the 7 layers, they are a part of the 7 layers. Now, these 7 layers, aren't they a part of the Vedas or
They are not part of the Vedas. Veda is only the first layer. Other 6 layers are based on the Vedic teaching.
Got it. Okay.
Rajeshji,
Yeah.
I have 2 questions. Small question. One is
Sure.
the Atmabodha and Tattvabodha, are they same?
Atmabodha, Tattvabodha is a prose form. It is a shorter form. Atmabodha is in a poetic form. It is talking about exactly the same content.
So it is the same, both Atmabodha and the Tattvabodha. The second
difference is-
question. Okay,
yeah.
the second question is, in all the shlokas, when they describe the whole Vedic scriptures, they say Shruti, Smriti, Purananam. That means one is something we hear, which is revealed to us, which is Shruti, and then the Smriti, Puranas. So in between there is one second or third of them that is missed. Why is that?
It means this on a broad scale, everything else like the sutras and all these literature can be considered as part of Smriti because they are all remembered. They are not actual Shruti. So on a broader classification, you can call it like that. But
Okay, so it fits into the Smriti group.
it can loosely fit into the Smriti group.
Okay.
But one difference is, since you asked that question, Tattvabodha means it is knowledge about Tattva. Tattva means what?
Philosophy, right?
Absolute.
Oh, okay.
Right? Tat. And Atmabodha means knowledge about me.
Self.
And essentially, both are the same.
Okay. Tattvabodha is about.
Yep. Tattvabodha and Atmabodha.
Okay, great. That's something nice to know.
Any other questions?
The books that we see, like Swami Viditatmananda on Drisha Viveka, all that fit into the 7th layer?
Yes, it is 7th layer. The Drisha Viveka is definitely Prakarana Grantha, and it's an introductory book. not the advanced book.
Got it.
Drisha Viveka is a teaching methodology followed in Vedanta. So it is introduced in a very simple way by Shankaracharya in a textbook. And Lekhu Vakya Vritti is another book. Then actually, there are so many books. Shankaracharya composed a lot of book on this Prakarana categories.
You talked about two rishis, right?
Yeah.
Who are those two rishis?
They,
Vyasa one and
which one?
you said two rishis. You mentioned about two rishis. So
Yeah.
one is Vyasa and who's the other one?
No, actually, I mentioned Vyasa is the compiler of the Veda. And I talked about the other rishis as Atharva Rishi and Angiras. Because
They are one of the Sapta rishis, right? Angirasa belongs to Sapta rishi.
yeah, I mean, these two rishis discovered the teachings of the Atharva Veda. So the Atharva Veda is compiled from the teachings of these two rishis, not teaching what they got revealed. That is what is Atharva Veda.
Oh, okay. Angirasa.
Yeah.
So where does the other rishis also have some important place in this?
Oh, absolutely. For example, Vasishta's compilation is there in these Vedas, I mean, and also Vishwamitra's compilation is there. But these two rishis made a significant progress, lot of content, and that is why Vyasa organized their own teaching in the form of one Veda when he compiled it. So typically, these rishis, they are not like modern people. Like modern person, when he writes a paper, more than paper, he writes his name. Right? This is composed by so and so. But that is absent in the case of most of these Vedic teachings. So it's very hard to trace who composed it, because they never cared about their name. Because even in the modern world, right, some teachers, and actually I still remember in one of the lectures Swami Chinmayananda tells, he was asked where exactly you need to be a little bit careful. So his answer was, when the messenger is given more importance than the message, know that it's a flag.
So Rajesh, just as Bhagavad Gita,
Yeah.
it is the song of God.
Correct.
So it was spoken by God Himself, Bhagwan Shri Krishna.
Yes.
Vedas. Who are the authors of the Vedas? They are all different rishis.
Correct. Means they are not the authors; they are the receivers of these mantras. For example, what means even you can see that in the other literatures also, right? For example, if you take Quran, they say that it got revealed to prophet.
To prophet, yes.
Yeah. For example, if you take the second Surah, like it got revealed in 23 years.
Yes.
It is revealed like that. Exactly the same idea here.
And similarly, all the 66 books of the Bible
Yep.
were
But
also revelations.
yeah, revelations. That is what every scripture is like that. That's why I started with the general definition of scripture, and we came here, right? So we started with the broad general definition. Then we came to the Vedic literature. We identified each layer, and finally we just focusing on one piece of it. So it is important that where exactly we belong to this particular literature. So Bhagavad Gita is part of Mahabharata, by the way.
Rajesh, on the pre-Upanishads, you mentioned about four books, right? Four literature. One is Tattva Bodha, Atma Bodha, Viveka Chudamani, and the last one is Anubhuti Prakasham.
Viveka Chudamani is there. Actually, there is more. Like there is Drisha Viveka, as Gina said, and then you have Sadhana Panchakam is there.
What is that?
Sadhana Panchakam, which we
Sadhana Panchakam. Okay.
After Atma Bodha, we are going to do that, right? So then you have the Lekhu Vakya Vritti is there, and then you have Drisha Viveka is there. Aparokshanubhuti is there.
Aparokshanubhuti, that's what, because that's
yeah. There are a lot of literature in that category. See, the problem is when you have too many choices people get confused. That is another problem.
Mm.
If you have only one book, it is easy, but each literature has its own purpose. That's why I spend this much time. So in between, I will show you how Ramayana relate to Veda, how Mahabharata relate to Veda, how Bhagavatam relate to Veda. In between, in our Vedanta study series, we will introduce, maybe take a small portion of from here, there, and try to introduce that. So it's very interesting.
Mm.
Very good. Very good. Any other
Raj,
question?
Rajesh, in the Prakarana Granthas, so is there any order in which Shankara wrote? Like, did he write Tattva Bodha first? Or
I don't know. Actually, it's very hard to tell that. Only thing I know is that the final composition is what you call the Snatana Panchaka.
okay.
So,
So
Rajesh,
Rajesh, sorry,
Yep.
go ahead, Rajesh.
okay, Rajesh. So Gita, which is part of the Mahabharata, is really is called the Itihasa then.
It is part of the Itihasa. Yes. It is Vyasa when he again, that clearly shows that even the purpose of Itihasa is to connect to the Vedic teaching. Bhagavad Gita, which is a summary of the entire Vedanta, is inculcated as part of the Itihasa. So if you take Ramayana, you have Vibhishana Gita. You have Rama Gita, you have Vibhishana Gita. Lot of places, wherever possible, this Vedic teaching is inculcated, like in the form of teachings, in the form of even stories. It's there, beautifully inculcated.
Thank you.
Rajesh, I wanted to ask that, is Bhagavad Gita then similarly considered, should it be considered as a revelation or not, since it was directly spoken by God?
It's not a revelation, even though you can say it, but it enjoys us the status of a fifth Veda because of the quality of the content, because it is 100% aligned with the Vedic teaching, but it cannot be considered as a Shruti. Suppose Bhagavad Gita contradicts with a teaching of an Upanishad teaching, then we take the Upanishad teaching. But so far, everybody tried. Bhagavad Gita is 100% aligned. And so is the other scriptures. Like if you take Brahma Sutra, it is very well aligned. Yoga Sutra, it is very well aligned. Because the Patanjalis, Vyasas and Naradas, they are self-realized masters. So is Krishna. And Krishna, by the way, in the 4th chapter of the Gita, Krishna tells, by the way, I'm not teaching you anything new. I'm just quoting the Vedic teaching. That's it. And you could see even in the Bhagavad Gita, right? Remember when we did the Bhagavad Gita 2nd chapter, when we were doing the 18th, I think 22nd verse, I told you, right? This is a verbal copy of the Kathopanishad. That shloka was, Krishna exactly took it and he just changed one word or something like that and put it in. And you could see the same definition in multiple scriptures. So for example, when we were studying 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, I showed, right? Almost everything is very much similar to the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. The definition of yoga, yogaha chitta vritti nirodha. Yatro uparate chittam niruddham yoga seveya. Like that, definitely. Abhyasa vairagyatan nirodha. Exactly the same thing in the Bhagavad Gita. So like that, there you can see a beautiful alignment in these teachings. These teachings are time tested. But the problem is we should understand that properly. More than believing, you have to understand and then believe. It is going to make you have to have the faith. But the blind faith is not good. You have to understand. Krishna never told you in the Bhagavad Gita, believe me blindly. And to that extent, if you go to the 78th verse of the Bhagavad Gita, you could see Krishna telling, I explained to you everything. Now take what you understood properly. And you are given complete choice to ask questions. Bhagavad Gita, you could see Arjuna saying the 3rd chapter, the first verse is, 2nd verse is, you confused me terribly. That's what Arjuna tells. So that choice is given.
So Rajesh, for a seeker, for a student who is undertaking a serious study of all the scriptures, Is there a prescribed order, like a syllabus?
Absolutely. So that's exactly what we are following now, right? So we did the introduction to Vedanta, and now the first prescribed text is either Tattvabodha or Atmabodha, and that is why we are doing it. Very good. Any other questions?
So we should do after this Atma Bodha, we should do Tattva Bodha.
It's
Correct?
same content, Bonaji. So most when we will do Sadhana Panchakam, and then we can go to Isha Upanishads
Okay.
or any other book of the choice. Means, but Tattvabodha and Atmabodha can talk more or less the same content.
Same thing. Okay, because I've heard a lot of lectures on Tattva Bodha from Mani, our guru, and I'm trying to, now it's falling into place, like everything. It was all scattered, and now I'm trying to put everything into one.
That's very important, because remember, that's why I said like the sequencing is very important. So we need to make sure that we are going to spend extra time to make sure that it is the dots are connected and the teaching flows through, right? So that's one of the key operating principle which we operate. Even Bhagavad Gita, that's what we try to do. And for that, we need to be grounded on the traditional teaching.
Viveka Chudamani is an introductory text.
Again, introductory, but it is in a law. It explains this. Whatever we study in 67 verse, in Viveka Chudamani, you see that in 700 verse. So Shankaracharya tells, right, the skill of a master or a teacher should be, you should be able to explain that in a single sentence, and you should be able to explain that in 5,000 lines, 5,000 sentences, the same idea. So when you understand something properly, you can summarize it properly, and you can elaborate upon the need. And in modern world, which is also true, right? Very much true. So a lot of new people joined. So anybody has any questions or any comments? Feel free to ask any questions. No formalities here. But glad that these many people joined, and hope everybody enjoyed it. So we will just...
Rajesh ji, this is Vishal.
Yes.
And just what some of us are new, including me.
Yep.
So on the daily life, you know, when the knowledge that we're getting, how do you make use of this knowledge in the daily lives? Like, I'm sure some of you who have been into this for a long time would have been practicing, and this would have made life somewhat better because of the knowledge and its implications. So some quick thoughts on that. Basically, what should motivate us to come next time, kind of thing?
See, one thing is you can study this theoretically. Second thing is you have to live it. So, for example, I can teach you Satyam Vada or Dharmam Chara. These are the foundational Vedic teaching. Speak truth and practice Dharma. But why I'm not able to practice Dharma properly? For example, simple Dharma. Why I'm not able to do the exercise? Because I find that 30 minutes sleep more interesting than getting up and doing the exercise. But for you to practice this, you have to understand the value. So the purpose of this teaching is to make sure that you're understanding, right? Sometimes you feel that, most of the people feel that by growing and grabbing and winning the world is going to make you happy. So this teaching is going to put things at the proper places. For example, it tells you that, okay, that is not going to give you the infinite amount of happiness, but it is going to make you comfort. So comfort and happiness are different. So the question is, how do you kindle that happiness which is already within you? So certain practices, right? We are going to talk about Karma Yoga, and we are going to talk about Upasana Yoga. If you practice that 5 minutes every day, like, for example, Karma Yoga means at least if you start doing these Panchamahayajna, and Upasana Yoga, if you do a 5 minutes meditation every day, immediately you will see the benefit in your life. For example, you may not become a self-realized master, but you will see small changes in your life. And that is the best incentive for you to come back. And each person sitting here, including myself, came with a skeptical mind. And we all are committed to this teaching when you see some benefits. And the only way for you to get that benefit is start these practices. I would say from tomorrow, at least if you can start that 5 minutes meditation and start practicing these Pancha Mahayajna. These two are the starting point. And we will elaborate this topic more and more as we go further.
How do you self-analyze whether I'm doing the right thing? Am I already doing the karma Pancha Mahayajna, or am I meditation part? If I don't do, then I know I'm not doing it right.
No, I think the Pancha Mahayajna is very easy to track and monitor. Pancha Mahayajna is basically you're making conscious effort in 5 things. One is supporting other human being. It could be a monetary help, or it could be a listening ears, or it could be a hug. That's good enough. So make sure that it's a checklist. So you have to follow that religiously. Second is what? Bhuta Yajna. Bhuta Yajna means at least you are not spoiling the nature. You are not throwing stuff outside, right? You are not, means even here I see people throw plastic outside. I'm not doing it. And when I get a chance, I plant a tree. Or when I go to a pet shop, I may donate $1. All that is Bhuta Yajna. So Manushya Yajna, Bhuta Yajna, and then you have the Deva Yajna. Some prayer, 5 minutes prayer. If you're an agnostic, just focus on some ideology, right? So for example, you have a vision, for example, to teach a kid, or say follow certain dharma. So that's very important. If you're a religious person, 5 minutes of prayer. That is not like while you drive, it's okay. That prayer is good, but dedicated prayer. Just go in front of an altar and do a prayer. You don't need to recite a complicated Sanskrit mantra, but talk freely to God. So that is, and then you have the Pitru Yajna. Pitru Yajna, remember your ancestors, your family, not just the ancestors, but the living family also. Have a 5 minutes family time. 5 minutes. Just talk to your daughter or son, talk to your spouse, smile at your spouse. That's one advantage of this lockdown. A lot of family timing is happening. And finally, Brahma Yajna. Study your scripture, 1 verse every day. This is a checklist, and you know, if you do this, automatically you will see the effect. Second thing is the Upasana Yoga. So Upasana Yogas are 4 types. Means we are exceeding the time. Those who want to leave, they can leave. So what we do is 1 hour class, and we'll spend some 15 minutes for these type of question answers, just for the new people. So Upasana Yoga, 4 types of discipline. One is body level discipline. The 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita brilliantly captured that, right? Yuktahara viharasya, yukta cheshtasya karmasu, yukta sopnava bodhasya, yogo bhavati dukkha. The best lesson in any of the appropriate food, meaning quality and quantity, not too much, not too less. And what is appropriate food? The definition is given in the 16th chapter. That is that which is good for your body. Nothing else, Krishna said. That which is good for your body. That is the yuktahara. Then vihara, your activities, not too much. You don't want to exercise 15 hours. Appropriate level of activity. Then yutta cheshta, vihara means, sorry, the recreation. You have to have appropriate level of recreation. Not too much, not too less. And then the activity. And then your sleep. Not too much sleep, not too less sleep. So this is the physical level of discipline. Then what? Anudvegakaram vakyam satyam priyahitam. Speech level discipline. Speech level discipline means you have to speak politely, meaning sometimes it doesn't mean that you should not get angry, right? That's not what he is saying. Don't hurt anybody with verbally abuse anybody unnecessarily. Your words should be priyam and hitam. Even if I abuse, I get angry, it's for his benefit. It's not to show my frustration. That's not the case. So we'll see that in the 16th chapter, brilliantly explained. So the verbal level discipline, because physical level discipline is more easier. For example, suppose I may feel hitting a person. I may not hit, but I may hit with my mouth. Avoid it. Then the third thing is what? Mental level discipline. So practice meditation. So the meditation is categorized into 4 categories: the relaxation meditation, the concentration meditation, expansion meditation, and value meditation. This is the entire sadhana. You will see this in Sadhana Panchakam. 40 sadhanas are given by Shankaracharya. All these things will come there. And if you practice this, you will see effect in our day-to-day life. But on a high level, these are the different disciplines to be followed. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, so Bhuvanaji, why don't you chant the Purnamada and Sarvesh. Before that, let's just remember our healthcare workers and everybody fighting this battle for us.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschis dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
The presentation will be available in 5 minutes and the video we will put by Saturday. And any questions, please post that in our WhatsApp forum. Thank you and have a great week.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Thanks, Rajesh. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice.